This is my MiniOz FLARM. So this is an Australian version of the original classic FLARM, but made in a mini configuration. I've obviously got it pulled apart at the moment. And so it's a bit like the FLARM mouse in the sense that it doesn't have any display on the front. So you need a separate display, and I use a Swissbat V4 display for this particular FLARM. So it was built here in Australia by Swift, and it's somewhere written on the circuit board, so you can see it says there MiniOz version 1.03, and it uses an LEA4 S, I think, GPS chip. Yeah, so there you can see, made by swiftavionics.com.au. So here's the GPS, U-block LEA4S0-000. Now that this particular FLARM has given me incredibly good service for something like 20 years, maybe a bit longer. I can't remember exactly when I bought it. And it was used as a portable FLARM for competitions. I used to own a vintage glider, which of course I didn't fly in comps, although I always wanted to, and I would hire aircraft to fly in competitions, and this would and the display would be in a modular configuration. I could just plonk it on top of the panel and feed it power, and it would be good to go. So it uses an external GPS, passive or active. Here it is here. And it plugs into this GPS port here. Has a single RJ45 connector, which I use a modular splitter to split to go to the display and to the UDI. And it uses a little rubber ducky antenna. Now it works really well. I get about 20 kilometers range out of it, aircraft to aircraft, which is pretty good. So a few weeks ago it stopped working, and I've spent a lifetime playing with electronics. I'm an advanced amateur radio operator who restores radios as a hobby, and I play around with computers like Raspberry Pis and all those kinds of things. So I had a quick look at this device to figure out what was wrong with it, thinking that possibly the GPS module was dead, and I was thinking, well, I can replace that with a more modern version if I can find something that's compatible. There were a few LEA4Hs available, which I started to look into the compatibility of, which I thought was probably likely to be good, and I could unsolder this and solder it. Now everything, I think pretty much everything on here is surface mount, so that presents a challenge to many people. Anyway, what I realized when I started looking through the data sheet for this GPS module was that it has a little tiny resistor in series, which you can see a couple of marks beside that where I've had the soldering iron trying to make sure there was no cold joints there. And I was using a little tiny soldering iron that I carry with me when I'm out at the field, which is 2.5 hours away from here. I wouldn't generally recommend playing around with surface mount devices with a big soldering iron. You can see the couple of burn marks on the printed circuit board there, but it turned out it wasn't bad joints. It's actually the resistor has failed. So what happens with this particular model of FLARM is that resistor needs to be in series with this antenna socket for the GPS module to work. So that resistor there has gone short circuit. So and I'm going to replace it. So anyway, what that means is this GPS here just doesn't send data to the GPS module. Now what I've done to confirm that is I plugged in a cable to this socket, plugged it into my computer using a serial to a USB interface, and ran Teraterm, which is equivalent to, no, I ran PuTTY actually, which is a kind of terminal program to have a look at the NMEA stream, the data stream that's coming from the GPS module. And I could see that the GPS module would boot okay, all the tests, startup tests would run, and what would happen was I would get an altitude which I believe is stored in non-volatile memory. So the last altitude would show up, but the lat and long wouldn't appear. So I figured the GPS module is probably good. I suspect that resistor is dead, and that's what's preventing it from working. Now, that resistor, I've tested it in place, but there's always, you shouldn't really test resistors in place, you should take them off the circuit board and test them. I will do that when I get a second just now, but I totally suspect that resistor is dead. Now, while I'm waiting for the proper surface mount resistor to arrive, there's a fair bit of room here, and I figure I can put a standard through-hole resistor there temporarily. So I've looked at got a magnifying glass and looked at the configuration, the number on the top of that resistor. I can't remember what it is, 10X or something like that. Anyway, it's a 10 ohm resistor, so it's a tiny little resistor. So I'm going to go to my local JCar and pick up a standard through-hole 10 ohm resistor, and I'll just solder it in place there very carefully, try not to get the solder tabs to run together. That's the issue, and we'll see if that fixes it up. So that's a little useful tip for those who might be running a Swift Avionics MiniOz, or have one in their cupboard that's stopped working. I suspect this fault might be fairly typical. What I suspect has happened is when you turn the master switch on and off in the glider, you can get a power spike. Now, I've got a habit, which you shouldn't have, of switching the master switch on and off relatively quickly when I'm doing a reset of the baud rate for different devices. So I put a new UDI in or something and reconfigure the baud rate on my V4 display, or for whatever reason it's stopped working and I have to reconfigure the baud rate. Sometimes I can't remember what the configuration settings are on the V4 without consulting the manual, and I'll just run through 4 or 5 different settings till one works, and I turn the master switch off and turn it back on to reset. Now, you really should probably wait 10 seconds before you turn the master switch back on, but I'm a little impatient, so what's probably happened there is I've spiked that resistor with a power spike, and it's died because of it. So we'll give that a try, because the new FLARMs are ridiculously expensive. I don't know what I paid for this. Probably, I suspect it would have been around the $500 to $700 mark 20 years ago. You're looking at $3,000 now for a power FLARM, 3,000 Australian, and I just can't justify that, especially when I think that possibly we'll all end up being forced to go ADSB in and out eventually. So let's see if this repair will work.